Of course, on the line with us now, Bob Chapman has been at this for, even a little bit longer than I have, about 50 years. And of course, he's going all over the world, doing programs. In fact, he was on Greece recently, Greek televisions. Bob, what happened when you were on Greek television?
I don't know. I had the link that actually was on radio.
Okay.
And I had the link in this past issue that just came out on Saturday.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know. Let me think. I think it's probably in the European section.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in just a moment. Well, this is Dr. Stan. I guess is Bob Chapman. He's just saying that he was on the radio over there in Greece, and for about 20 minutes, he just told them what they should do. Default on your loans. Basically, they were lent to you by unscrupulous banks that wanted to enslave your people. I mean, they created the money out of nothing. They had probably maybe $4 or $5 at the most upon every $100 they lent you. Maybe only $2 or $1 out of $100 that they lent you. They had their own money invested. The rest of it is simply created out of nothing. That's what banks do. They create money out of nothing. They lend it to you, and then they charge you interest. And of course, if they do it to the governments, why, of course, then the governments enslave the people to pay back the banks. Well, anyway, of course, we've got a real problem because they've done the same thing here in the United States, and we have tremendous loans, to our own banks and certainly to other banks. And, of course, they will then have to extract the money to pay the interest from the American people. So you pick up the story, Bob.
I think that the Supreme Court will refuse the case. I think they're going to have to tell people. And I think they can draw it out until June, and that's it.
All right, Bob's talking about the Federal Reserve. Somebody, I think Bloomberg, had actually filed a suit saying, we want to know what you've done with all this money. Was it $8 trillion you've created or $12 trillion, and who to be given it to and why? And they said, we don't have to tell you. So they appealed it to an appeals court, and the appeals court said, you're going to have to tell the public what you're doing. So they're going to appeal it to the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court doesn't take the case, then the Federal Reserve has two possibilities. One is they could abide by the law, or they could say, you try to make us do that, and we'll topple your whole economy. Who do you think really runs this country? Do you honestly believe Congress and the Senate have anything to say? We run the things, and you better not fool with us, or you're in real trouble. Go right ahead, Bob. It'd be interesting to see what happens.
That's what Hank Paulson said to the American people and Congress in particular. Look, we'll take the whole thing down. I mean, you want a depression, we'll arrange it for you. Either give us some money, we'll destroy you.
And basically,
they
told members of Congress there'd be troops in the streets on Monday if they didn't pass the TARP legislation, the Troubled Assets Relief Program. And, of course, it gave about, I think, $100 billion in bribes to the congressmen. They got the money. They got the money from them and violated their own laws. After all, they passed initially. Congress repudiated the TARP legislation, the $750 billion that they asked for. It didn't matter. The law was you couldn't bring it back till the next session of Congress. They brought it back 4 days later with about an extra $100 billion added on in the way of bribes for the congressmen. They switched some 55 votes. I mean, believe me, we've got very expensive congressmen. It takes a lot of money to bribe a congressman. But when you have unlimited money, that's what they did. And they got the TARP legislation through so that they could give the money to the little guy who was losing his home. And then Hank Paulson changed his mind and gave it to his friends on Wall Street, but he forgot to tell them they were to lend it to the industries and keep the economy going. So they lent it all over the world. They lent it to China and to India and Dubai and Spain, but they forgot they were supposed to lend it to America and brought the whole economic system down. They know what they're doing. They just don't want us to know. Is that right, Bob?
That's correct. And I think probably they're going to have to come out and tell the people next summer. But, they feel that the longer they can extend telling the people what they did, and then they'll probably take another 3 months. So it'll probably be a year from now. And that's when the information will come out. But it's just disgusting, the power politics that go on. And at least 95% of the people in Congress are paid off. And that's why I've been saying for so long, please, kick them all out. There's a handful of good ones, and that's it. Get rid of them. And so I think we're going to see some changes.
In fact, I saw a clip this morning on a YouTube with Nancy Pelosi, and she was saying, well, we're going to have to pass this Obama legislation to find out what's in the bill. We're going to have to. I mean, it's one thing to hear people say what she said, another thing to see her. I think she was at the Council on Foreign Relations press conference saying, we're going to have to pass this legislation so we can see what's in the bill. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the people we're paying to rule us. Go ahead, Bob.
That's right. And, the statement in and of itself is so infantile. I mean, how can any educated person stand still for that? I mean, it is beyond belief that that kind of a statement would be made, never mind accepted.
She's the third most powerful person in the nation today. She's third in line for the presidency. She has her own jet and spends $500,000 every month, probably more than that, just flying back and forth here on the weekends. She's above the law, She's so concerned about us common people, but she can't fly on regular planes. She has to have her own large jet plane. It's got to be large enough so it doesn't have to refuel along the way, so she can go all the way from New York City to San Francisco every weekend. Go right ahead, Bob.
Well, she's independently wealthy. A multi-millionaire.
Oh, I know, but you see, she doesn't want to spend her own money. Oh, after all, she's the third most important person in America. She's third in line for the presidency. And, that's why I tell people, pray for Barack Obama, because, if he dies, why, it's Joe Biden. And that's a horrible thing to contemplate, but even more horrible would be Nancy Pelosi. But go right ahead.
Well, anyway, that's the situation that the Fed's in. And the extent of what's happened is they had their $2.5 trillion in stimulus this past year. And they also, part of that was the $868 billion that Congress appropriated. And the amount needed probably is going to be $2.5 to $3 trillion per year for the next couple of years.
But where's the money coming from, Bob?
Well, number one, after the election, I expect voting, and I think that Congress will approve about $500 billion in spending. This will be a lame duck Congress, and the Fed will have to come up with, $2 trillion or whatever the number is, and they'll make it work, and they will come up with it. They'll buy treasuries and agencies, and they'll go on another binge buying this toxic debt that's out there in the hands of the banks to clear their books, and they'll pay them 80 cents on the dollar, and they won't tell us what they're paying for it. And then right now they're getting ready at the banks to buy back the paper that they just sold to the Fed for 80 cents. They're going to buy it back for 20 cents.
And so basically what they're doing is creating all this money to refinance the banks. Is that right?
Absolutely.
And we're seeing this massive transfer of wealth, the greatest transfer of wealth that has ever taken place. It's taking place today, and the average American has no idea what's going on until one day he wakes up to find himself living in a third world nation.
We're already in a third world nation, and it's going to get worse. I describe it as if you lived through the 30s, 40s, and 50s, you're going back to it. If you haven't, talk to people who did, because they know what it's about. And that's the way you're going to live, and it's not going to get any better for a long, long time. And these people who continue to run credit card debt up, we see a diminution in debt, but in fact, they're not reducing their debt. They're still spending. We're still doing 69.5% of GDP is public spending. Yeah, spending's down. The growth rate is 0.5% or 1%. Certainly not good enough to come up with a good overall GDP figure for the economy. I think it's 5 good quarters, 3.25% GDP growth. That's over. And they shouldn't have waited as long. They were dumb. and they waited a long time, and so now what's happened is that they got to rush this money into the system. One of the interesting things is that the banks, the lenders, the small and medium-sized borrowers, that create 70% of the jobs, the better quality ones have now been, since June, over 3 months, offered loans, and they won't take them. We don't believe the government. We don't think there's going to be any recovery. We don't know what the tax situation is going to be. You pass this health reform thing with 19 taxes in it, and you also stuck us that we have to pay higher rates for insurance. So what we're going to do is bug out of the program and pay 60, 70, 80 grand. We'll never see it again, and you can take care of them.
And of course, the other thing is now that every business is going to have, if you buy anything more than $600 from anybody, you're going to have to get their Social Security number and put in the 1099 form. I mean, here, even in our small business, if we have to do that, and it starts in, 2013, why, of course, you'd almost have to have one or two additional people, keeping track of all this and getting the Social Security numbers from everybody so that we can send in 1099 to the federal government. $600? Or is it going to trigger this? I mean, this is madness. But if you wanted to destroy our nation with paperwork, do you know a better way to do it? And, of course, it's been suggested in the past the best way to destroy America was not from outside, but from within, and put people into a massive bureaucracy with all sorts of rules and regulations and taxes, destroy the economy. My goodness, it's almost as if they're following a plan. Do you think that that's really what the people behind Barack Obama want? And I'd like to suggest that's exactly what they want, and out of the chaos that is coming will, of course, come the demand for a change, a fundamental change in the structure of our society. Maybe if we went into a global economy, maybe if we suddenly, of course, simply would do away with our sovereignty and move towards a world government, they could solve the problems, they could run it more efficiently, and we could go back to the good old times. Ladies and gentlemen, good old times aren't coming back again. They're not coming back probably during our lifetime, but if we can preserve any element of freedom, we'll be very fortunate. We'll be back in just a moment with Bob Chapman.